This video is about one of my friends here in Queen Creek and his Jaguar collection and other cars. The reason I'm showing this book cover is it is a book that he wrote. I won't go into the details of the book, but I can tell you it's a very interesting read. He was born in France in 1940, and until his move to America in 1947, I believe, he didn't speak much English. He learnt most of his English by watching Laurel and Hardy, which I guess is why he twiddles his fingers a lot on his bow tie. Yes, I'm kidding. The book is worthwhile getting, and I'll leave a link in the description as to where you can get it, should you be interested in a story from a very remarkable guy that, despite being born in France, did actually manage to succeed well in life and enjoy a great time. As you will see as I pan back, this is on a Jaguar. No, this Jaguar is not Larry's, this is mine. But I felt it appropriate to rest his book on a Jaguar because he is a Jaguar nut like me. Let's get on and meet Larry and look at his cars.
Hi, I'm Larry, and I appreciate being able to discuss some of my automotive collection, cars, etc., memorabilia. And my house has a very long driveway, which I'm tickled pink about because I've never had a long driveway in a house before, and I think it's terrific. And in fact, my driveway is so long that at the end of the road where it ends, it's a different zip code than it is at the house. At any rate, my wife wanted a greeter, so she's very artistic. She's a crafts person. She created this. That's her greeter to our house. I'm the other sort of guy that likes cars and stuff. This is a grill out of a 50s Chevrolet, what they call advanced design back in the 50s. I thought it'd make a great ornament for the exterior of the house someplace, and here it is. So that's my entrance into my house.
Okay, this is a brief scan of the hell that Larry has to suffer. He has terrible things that he has to look after. I am told this is a Chevrolet. To me it's a car. Then we have a beautiful E Type in yellow, which we will get into more. Then we have a lovely, gorgeous XK 120, and all of these cars have some very unique features. And as I've threatened Larry, he promises to tell me about these unique features as long as I don't kill him. Now, there is one thing I just want to zoom up on for you guys, and that is something over there on the wall. It is two remarkable cam covers. You will note these cam covers have a missing stud on the front. That's because they are remarkably special. Now, lots of people would have sold these, but for some strange reason Larry mounted them on the wall. Okay, here we go with some rather unique stuff. These are all Jaguar Key Rings, or as I believe some Americans call them, key fobs. Now let's move over here, and there is something else purely Jaguar. Well, Jaguar Daimler. Belt buckles and pins. Now we move a little bit to the left, and we find badges. This man has an addiction, and don't we all?
Okay, we just did a kind of a prompt look at some of my wall hangings, etc. And they're a typical memorabilia you have in your garage. You probably can tell I'm more of a Jaguar enthusiast, even though I did spend 30 years with Chevrolet. I've always been even prior to Chevrolet, very enthusiastic about Jaguars. I've had several. And I belonged to a Jaguar club up in Oregon. And of all the things I have on the wall, this one means probably more to me than anything else, because a fellow club member, elderly gentleman, was a professional artist. And he did this for the club. I got a copy of it. And he was the type of guy that, you know, when holidays rolled around, if you got a card in the mail, he never purchased any cards. He just made them himself. So that was kind of special. Anyway, of all the wall hangings I have, this has more meaning to me because it comes from a close friend. As I said, he was kind of elderly. Actually, he purchased, right after the war, brand new Jaguar sedan, probably around 46, 47 when he bought it or something like that, in New York. Bought it new in New York and drove it clear to Oregon from New York. So, and he had it till the day that he passed on. So this is something that's kind of special for me. This is a 1953 XK120 fixed head coupe, is what they call them in England. There was 3 variations on the 120s, what we would refer to as a roadster, and then they had a convertible they call a drop head coupe, and this is the standard coupe referred to as a fixed head coupe. They were built from 51 to 54. This is a 1953 fixed head coupe. Approximately 2,600 of these fixed head coupes that were built during that period, 51 to 54. This one was shipped to California back in I think November of 52 as a 53 model, and it was actually sold in Escondido initially. And a fellow from Oregon, Bob Miller was his name, he's the guy I bought it from back in 77, but he went down to California, bought this car in 1954, so it was still relatively new. Now, he really loved this car, but he was not a Jaguar enthusiast per se. He was an enthusiast of this specific car, and he was a very handy, talented builder, a sheet metal worker, etc. So he looked at the car and saw things that he thought he could improve on from what the Jaguar did. And some examples I will point out to you here. The bumpers on this car, normally, as you would expect when you see it, are attached to the fender here, but in fact, he attached it on the back side, so it's not really attached to the fender. And if you look at these and you see them as used cars, quite often they'll have a little crimple right here. And that's what happens when you hit something with your bumper, and because it's attached to the fender, it's going to cause this to come out a little bit. Not on this one, because it's basically way ahead of its time and had basically 5-mile-an-hour bumpers. You could hit it and it's not going to make anything. One thing he didn't change, and that I'm proud of, is the grill, because probably 99% of 120s you see have a reproduction grill. They're very fragile. They don't last. This one is original, and that is kind of special, the fact that it's original. Other things he did to the car that I want to point out is the Fender Welding, which is a fabric material. Not on this car. I mentioned he was a sheet metal worker. This is metal, and it'll never wear out, never fray. But it's exactly the same size. It looks exactly the same as you would on a standard car, and except it'll last forever. Full of little tiny modifications he made. He just loved, here's your gas. Well, regular 120s don't have this. He felt, geez, you're going to put gas in the car? You don't want to have gas drops landing on the paint, etc. So he added this little rubber piece that you can put over to keep the body clean and not spill any gas on it.
Neat trick.
So that was just typical of all the little minor touches you have on this thing. The rear plate here to hold the license plate, and in England, they're proud of their licensing because they have much bigger license plates than you do here, and this is normally wider. And now I have one up on the shelf back there that's an original, And he thought, oh, it's too wide, so he cut it down. So it's actually cut down. It's the same shape and everything, but it's not quite as wide as the original. The other thing you'll notice on 120s, and it really makes you scratch your head because Jaguars built some really nice cars, and they do it in a really great way. But the backup light here on an original car has exposed wires coming out of the trunk to the backup light. He thought that was not the best way to handle that, so he built a little bracket with a pipe and had the wires running into the pipe so they're not exposed. And again, it's full of little touches like that that are not all that noticeable. So maybe we can take a peek under the hood, and I can point out a few things there too as well. Okay, as I mentioned, there's a lot of small modifications. These cars were renowned for maybe not having the best cooling system around at the time, and he felt he could improve on that. Normally on the stock radiator, and this is a stock radiator, but he modified it, there's a valley here where the radiator cap is actually recessed in the valley. He modified it so that the radiator would hold several cups of additional water to help out. And he also did a water recovery system, which you would probably call a puke tank, and it was a plastic container he had over here. I replaced the plastic container with one out of an E Type, so that helps as well in making sure that you don't overheat and lose your coolant. The only thing I did is I added the electric fan in the front with a switch inside so that you can control it when you want it on or off. If you're going to be delayed at a stoplight or something, you might want to turn on your electric fan.
Go.
I maybe failed to tell you when I'm talking about the outside, and it really applies to the interior, is that the doors on these things are notorious for having rather weak hinges. And you find a used fixed head coupe, and the odds are strongly that when you open the door, it's going to drop at least a quarter or half inch because of the hinges. And again, this Bob fella thought that could be improved on, so he strengthened the hinges, and they're as solid as can be. In fact, you can rock the whole car using an open door, and you couldn't do that on the stock 120. And then the other thing is, he felt it needed an armrest. So it didn't have an armrest. He found one in a Jaguar sedan, but gosh, it was a little bit too big for this size car, so he modified it, shortened it, and put it in here. The other thing that even 120 experts don't realize, don't pay attention to, the window crank and the door handle, they're in the wrong end. They should be reversed. This is exactly where the window crank goes. That's exactly where the door handle. He didn't like that, so he swapped them. Well, you got to know, he was pretty handy and knew what he was doing, because you have to redo all the mechanisms inside the door, which he did. And these doors, you probably notice, are quite wide. They're so wide, he thought, well, should be able to make use of that. So he created a little cubby hole in here where you could stash whatever it is you wanted to stash that you didn't want other people to know about. He did that on both doors, so that's a little extra. The floors in these things are made of wood, not on this one. He ripped out the wood and replaced it with metal. On the back side, there's two places where the batteries would go. It's a 12-volt car, but it had two 6-volt batteries, one on each side, in tandem. Well, he thought that's silly. He didn't want to pay for two batteries, so he put one 12-volt in there and left where the other battery normally would go an open space to, again, put whatever you wanted to put. Okay, what's in this particular 120 that you won't find in hardly any of them? It came with all Jaguar SK120s. The factory would put a little cardboard box with replacement parts, and they had a list sticker on it that listed all the parts that are in there. And almost none of those ever wound up in the customer's hands when they bought the car, because the dealers, being what the dealers are and how they operate, would take out the box, take all those spare parts, put them in their parts department, and resell them. So that's why most customers of XK120s never saw one of these.
Wow.
Okay, what we've got here is a 1968 Jaguar E Type. And it's not an XKE, it's an E Type. And I point that out because XKE is the common name used by Americans on these cars, and simply because, you know, we talked about the XK120, was followed by a XK140, then an XK150. When this came out, it was assumed there was a development of those cars, and it's not. It's basically a development of the cars that they used in competition at Le Mans and et cetera. So it was more of a development of a different type of competition car, and it came from the original racing car, the C types, followed by the D types, and when this was built for street use, etc., it became the E type. The XK and 120s, 140s, the XK stands for the engine that was used because that twin overhead cam 6-cylinder was an experimental engine, therefore the X, and they had different variations of it, and when we got to the K variation, that's the one that was just exactly what they wanted and what they built. That's where the XK comes from. So I straight away from what this car is, it's a 68 and it's a series 1.5. What does that mean? That the original E-types ran from 1962 essentially until 1967, and then they did an interim car where they made running changes as they were producing it until they got to the Series 2 in 1969. So there was about, some 5,200 of these that were built as Series 1.5 68 E-types. And there's some unique features to it. Why did they have to make these changes? Is because a lot of these cars were sold in the U.S. And the U.S. came out with these new automotive standards. And some of those standards Jaguar could not do with the Series 1. As an example, you could no longer have the covered headlights. So these headlights are open. Now I have a stone guard replacing what was the covered headlight at one time to keep the same lines going. But they had to eliminate the covered headlight because of the safety standards. This is, the 68s are the only E-type that have this particular trim on here, because in 69 they set the headlight further back, so you don't have the chrome piece that's this size. It's smaller because the headlight is further back on a 69. So basically, those are some of the changes. Another really oddball change, because of safety standards, was the eared knockoffs. You could still have the knockoffs, but you couldn't have the ears. Those were too dangerous. If you hit a pedestrian, you might hurt them with these ears sticking out. So that was, again, a U.S. safety standard. So you had to have an adapter without the ears. As you can see, I got rid of that and replaced it. What I did is I converted the 68 E-Type to a 1967 car. The other thing I did, which purists would cringe at, is the front bumpers. If you take a look at that, the front bumpers really come in three pieces. There's a section that goes to about here, separate piece, and then you have a secondary piece that's a bumperette that sticks up, and then the third piece is the piece on the end. So it's 1, 2, 3 pieces. I didn't like the bumperette sticking up. I didn't care for them. I didn't like the looks of them. I thought they detracted from the front. I removed it, welded the back piece and the front piece together, re-chromed them, and there you have it, one single piece bumper. So that's a change I made. Some other changes are under the hood. In addition to the U.S. Safety standards, this car was also one that was shipped to California, as a lot of E-types were, and California had emission standards. So it had to meet the California emission standards. And that was not necessarily a good thing for these Jaguar E-types. As an example, they were required to have, again, for smog purposes, etc., twin Stromberg carburetors. And it diminished some of the horsepower of these cars with twin Strombergs. I right away found a disposable area to drop those in and replace them with what should have been there in the first place is a triple SUs, which bumped up the horsepower somewhat. So that's a change I made. Additionally, for smog purposes, they ran a pipe from the exhaust manifold across here. You see these little indentations here. It's a pipe that ran across there so it could take those beautiful, great exhaust fumes and run them back through the carburetors, again for smog purposes. That, along with some other plumbing and hoses, etc., all went in the proper trash deposit, so that no longer smog held down. So some of the changes that I made underneath the hood. Again, converting it to a 67. If you look here at the windshield, on the 67 earlier cars, the rearview mirror was on a stalk, and the stalk could be moved. Not on the 68. They had it glued to the windshield. I didn't care for that, glued on the inside of the windshield, so I replaced it, put in that stalk where the mirror is adjustable again. Again, converting it to a 67.
Okay.
Okay, this car originally, to begin with, was a opalescent maroon color, which I didn't care for. And when I got it, I bought it in 77 in San Diego. And one of the first things I did is I had it repainted the Ferrari Fly Yellow. The interior was white, and I didn't think that'd go well with the Ferrari Fly Yellow. So I had the interior, I sprayed these portions. They're original. They haven't been changed. And the doors, that's all. I sprayed them myself, but I've replaced the seats since then, and Jaguar refers to these as not as tan, but as cinnamon, so they match basically what I sprayed. Those are essentially what I did on the interior to sort of fit in with the exterior color. The top also, the convertible top, was a white vinyl, which I guess looked good with the white interior, but I didn't care for that either. So again, this is cinnamon. It's a cloth top, and replace that as well. And I have in the corner, if you want to take a shot of it in the corner, I bought a hardtop, factory hardtop. Very rare, very few of them around. They're quite expensive if you have to get one. The car did not come with the factory hardtop, but I was able to locate one, and it fits nicely on the car. So I've got that. The other thing I did while we're here is the wheels and tires. The tires are 185 15s, relatively skinny for a modern car and for the performance of this car. So I wanted wider tires. So I did. I put 205s on it. The problem with that is that the spoke wheels needed to be a little wider. So these are 6-inch wide spoke wheels. The extra width allows the bigger tires. So the handling on this car and the performance on this car is probably better than most 68s, and again, it's closer to what a correct 67 would have been. Take a look at the inside of the car. This is a 1934 Chevrolet. I bought this one in 2009. I was living here in Arizona, but I went up to Oregon to buy it. I had another Chevy when I lived in Oregon before moving to Arizona. I had a 35 Chevrolet and sold it and regretted selling it. And I should explain, because you might think it was a different car. It was exactly the same as this car. It was a 35. Now, how could that be? In 1935, Chevrolet completely changed the design of their cars, all new body style. However, they also continued with their 34s. So in 35, they still built this car. It was called the Standard. The new body style cars were called Masters. So I had a 35 Standard, which basically looked pretty much like this car looks. This particular car has been a hot rod since the early 80s, with quite a few changes over time as hot rods are due to have done to them, upgrades, etc. So it's, as far as the drivetrain, it's pretty much the same as what it started with some time back. It's got a 1996 Chevrolet crate motor, a ZZ3 350 cubic inch, 350 horsepower motor. The transmission is a turbo 400 Chevy. It's got 9-inch rear end It's a Ford rear red, Dutchman rear axles. Even the frame is a TIG welded custom frame. What I did to it is it didn't have a rake. The wheels were basically the same size, and they were chrome wheels, and they were a lot skinnier than what I've got on the back here. So I changed those and put the steel wheels, those Will Smith wheels, and put the bigger tires on the back. I put drop spindles on the front, that's why it's got this rake. I put coilover shocks on it as well, and disc brakes. Those were all additions that I made. And because I put on these bigger tires on the back, the rear fenders were the standard size rear fenders, and they wouldn't fit over the rear wheel. So I bought extra fenders. These are 2 inches wider than standard. And when I bought the car, it was two-tone. It was this royal blue was on the body, and the fenders were black. So I had them painted the same color as the body. I also had to get a new running board because with a different size rear fenders, it wouldn't mate. So I got new running board. Now, of all the things I've done to it, oddly enough, the one thing that was the hardest to find was the rubber for the running board. This is the rubber that was on the running board that was on the car when I got it, and I was told, well, you can't take that off and reuse it. And every place that sold the correct rubber no longer was producing it. There was one place in Canada, I think, that could still have it, and they knew they were the only ones, and they wanted like $1,000. So I said, the hell with it. I got my razor blade. I was able to scrape off the rubber and put it on the new running board. So that's the basic change. Now you might ask yourself, what the heck is original on this car? Well, the body's original, the original steel body. That's correct. The taillights are the original taillights. The headlights are the original headlight. The hood's original, and the grill's original. Everything else is pretty much modern. On the inside, want to take a look on the inside.
Yeah.
The shifter was on the steering column, and I didn't particularly care for that, so I did a low-car, floor-mounted shifter. I put in new gauges with the classic gauges, so that's a new gauge package that's in there. The seats were Corvette cloth high-back bucket seats that just really didn't fit in there, so I replaced them with these Glide bench seats with the blue leather, and then the battery, you can only access it behind the passenger side bucket seat. And I thought that was, so it's still in the same place, but now you access it from the trunk instead of from in here. And it didn't have a glove box, so I created my own glove compartment in the back. And if you can see that, and a place where you can, again, if you like to stash stuff, here's another car where you can stash some things. And oh, it's got a radio, which you wouldn't know just by looking at it, but this is where the radio is, right up here.
Oh, neat.
Oh, and I should point out one thing. Whenever I have somebody join me in the car, go for a ride or whatever, the window crank. It's not a window crank. It's a power windows. You don't crank this. You just tap it. Tap it for down, tap it for up. So I have to warn people when they break off the handle. And then I added this molding down here, which I thought would be a nice touch, and just having the carpet go straight to the body. And then I put a bow tie in here too for my little Chevy. And that's pretty much the changes I made to it.
You're addicted to not leaving vehicles as they were.
Pretty much. I should point out one other thing. On these hot rods, rear view mirrors are almost typically hung from the door. And I think that's kind of a shabby way to do it. So I put mine mounted on the hinge, the door hinge. So it's
very clever.
No longer hanging on the door. And I added coilover shock. Oh, one more thing I should mention.
God.
One more thing. It had a Mustang 2 front end, as most hot rods do, but not like this one. This had an honest-to-goodness real Mustang II, Ford Mustang II, out of a scrapyard front end. So I replaced it. It's a Heights Mustang II style front end. A little bit different than having the real thing. A lot better, too.
You had to be different. More toys.
Okay, this is a 2007 Corvette. It's pretty much my everyday car when my wife's got the SUV out and I need to go someplace. This is the car I take. It's a C6, 6th generation Corvette, and it's one of my favorites. I happen to personal opinion, like these cars with the exposed headlights rather than the hidden headlights in prior generations. So it's one of my favorites. It's got the LS2 motor. It's about 400 horsepower motor. It's an automatic. It does have the Z51 performance handling package. It's got the better cooling system, bigger brakes, etc. So it's with the Z51, it's equipped to be used on the track. But other than that, it's just I like the color and I like the combination with the tan interior, and this is called Monterey Red. It was a pretty car, and that's the main reason I bought this one.
Locked.
Oh, you can't open it.
I'm
I
the
don't have
wrong.
my key with me.
Okay.
It doesn't use a key, but
He doesn't want to let us look
but
at
you-
the
but you-
inside. Obviously, he has all his drugs stashed in there and his girlfriend's phone number, so we can't look inside, but she's a beauty.
I mean, if you want, I can.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I should have thought to have a key fob on me.
That's okay.
Open the story. Okay, this is a 1957 Corvette. It was a body style. It's a 2-year body style with the single headlights, 56 and 57. The 57s are the ones that most people are after because they changed from a 265 V8 to a 283 V8 in 57, and also in 57 they introduced the 4-speed. This car was built in St. Louis, again in 57, in fact in January of 57. And when I bought it, I should say the history of it, it spent most of its time in Texas until about 1973 when it wound up in Wisconsin, Iota, Wisconsin. And the fella that bought it had a museum. He kept it in the museum, and he had 2 close friends in Wisconsin. And once in a while, when he needed some additional finances or whatever, he would sell a car to his close friend. It wouldn't even leave the museum. It was on paper, and the guy would sell it back to him a year later or whatever. They kept that going for a while. And they had a third friend who decided to build a dealership in Ohio, Canton, Ohio. And he built a dealership there. And when the fellow that owned this car got into his 80s, decided to sell in 2011, I think. It went to Ohio, and that's where I heard about it. So I got pictures of it and everything, saw the car, and decided that I'd like to have it. And I had somebody examine it, and they told me, yeah, it's a correct 283 motor, it's a 4-speed. The best thing about the car is there's no damage to the body. These cars are notorious, they're, fiberglass bodies, they get hit and repaired, etc. It's never been repaired, never been hit, so that was a big plus. So I went ahead and bought it, and as soon as it arrived, I checked the numbers on the engine, and it was the correct 2 4-barrels. That's what it came with, but the block, the numbers on the block showed it was a 56 265. So that wasn't any good. I got some money back from my purchase, and I was able to find another block that was available for sale. 1966 Corvette 327, 350 horse motor. I bought that, and that's what sits in here. It looks exactly like the 283, but it's actually a 66 Corvette 327 that's in here. The head is a 67 202 head, and the carburetors are the original dual 4s. So the other change I made in here was I had a 57 Corvette prior to this one in Oregon. It had a tendency to overheat. So what I did is I took, this is a windshield washer container that's supposed to go out to the windshield, but I altered it so that it actually goes out to the radiator, and this becomes my puke tank for the radiator. So that works out well. But so that's the basic changes I made. Oh, I also put in the Edelbrock high performance water pump in there, so the thing doesn't overheat. So
Okay.
it had a rat-eaten top, so I replaced the top. It's got a new top on it. The interior, the seats are indicated on the inside that they were made in 1973, so they were replaced at one time. Other than that, it's pretty original. Now I mentioned it's a 4-speed because the 4-speed came out in '57, but this car was not built with a 4-speed. This car was built in January, and the 4-speed wasn't made available until May. So that's really, it's a correct type of 4-speed. It's a Borg-Warner T10. It is correct for this car, but it had to be replaced at one time because it had to be either a Power Glide or a 3-speed when it came off the assembly line. So other than that, everything else is pretty much original. Other than the fact that everything's changed on it, it's pretty much original. And I just put radial tires, which, by the way, on these cars, when you switch from bi-ply to radial, that does more to improve the handling of the car than anything else. And it just makes a world of difference once you go to the radial tires. So that's pretty much the history of this beauty. And it's a driver, it's not a show car. And I get a lot of looks. Everybody, you drive around, people go, well, what year is it? And how fast does it go, as if that was important.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But anyway, I love it. It gets a lot of looks. And it's, I've always liked the 57s in particular. 58 that came out with the dual headlights, I never cared for those. In fact, Argus Duntoff didn't like the 58s either because they had chrome strips down the trunk. They had louvers on the hood, none of which were functional or mounted to anything, and they were just there for looks. And Argus Duntoff was never in for looks. Now, I might mention one thing else about this car.
Go ahead.
If you're interested in hearing about it. You might notice it's got cross flags in the coves. Well, they did put cross flags in the coves, but only on the fuel-injected cars. And it would have fuel injection script after the cross flags. But it was common practice. People liked the looks of them. And I did the cross flags. I put them in there. And I can tell you that all my Corvette enthusiast friends look at that and say, well, that's wrong. Why did you do that, etc. And I did it because I liked it and it's my car, and that was my choice. The other thing, one other thing that the enthusiasts and collectors will puke about. When I first got this car, I sat in it, and the steering wheel was right up against my chest. So, my God, why is it so close? So I went to car shows, etc. I looked at other cars, and the steering wheels were all just like this one, farther in. I said, well, how come mine's sticking out so far? So I got a hold of some Corvette specialists, and they said, well, what you have is an original steering column. Everybody swaps them out for 58 and newer columns because they were too long and they hit your chest. People didn't like those. You drove with your elbows out. So they either got swapped or they got cut. And this one has now been cut. Took 2 inches out of it, and it's a lot easier to drive.
Wow.
It's no longer original.
That's amazing. Well, Larry, thank you very much for showing us your cars. Sure, my viewers will love it. And I'll know that they'll make you lots of offers to buy them from you, which of course you will refuse because you're going to donate them all to me. Oh dear. No, seriously, Larry, I really do appreciate this. Again, thank you. I cannot thank you enough for letting me video this collection of yours. My collection is a lot smaller and a lot less illustrious, shall we say. Thank you again, Larry. We look forward to perhaps viewing your video, not your video, sorry, your car model collection at some point. There is one unique feature here that has not been mentioned. This one has been modified by age.
What this is, I've had a number of people come into my garage and see that photograph. And it seems on several occasions I've had the same pronouncement regarding what they thought that was. They all say, where did you get the picture of Dick Smothers? And I have to explain that, no, that is not Dick Smothers. That is actually me when I was the merchandising manager for Chevrolet Motor Division quite a few years ago.
At least 5, I would think. maybe 5 years.
Yeah,
Come
a
on
lot
now.
longer than that.
I mean, you sure you weren't a 70s porn star? We all did that in the 70s. Okay, I'm very much hijacking the end of this video, but with a couple of notes. Larry, as you can tell, is one hell of a character and has a beautiful collection. I know he's jealous of my Mark II, but he'll just have to live with that. It is possible, if I speak very nicely to him, that he may allow us to go for a ride in his various vehicles, for which I would obviously create a video. Again, if I speak very nicely to him, he might allow me to actually sit in the driver's seat and maybe drive one of his beautiful babies down the road for a few yards. If, for whatever reason, he doesn't like that, that's fine by me. I know how I would feel with someone driving one of my babies. If any of you would like me to persuade, cajole, bludgeon Larry into allowing me to videote the cars in action, please let me know. And should you wish to contact Larry for whatever reason, then you will have to do it through me, and I don't want him to be inundated with stupid questions, but I'm sure there are enthusiasts out there that would love to chat to him. Therefore, email me at gstargarage@gmail.com, and that is star with 2 R's. Sorry to hijack the end of this video, but I don't want people giving him crap for no reason. He has been good-hearted enough to allow me to video his collection, and for that I will be eternally grateful. However, at the end of the day, as you all know, my catchphrase, get out in that garage and do some shit.